everyone, Aurora here with Supercharged Science, Homeschool Science, and Kids at Home Education for K through 12. Today we're going to be doing a class in biology, and so we are going to be doing some life science, and I'm going to answer some questions that have been coming in. So I know I'm a little bit early, I'm like 5 minutes early, no problem. If you're just getting set up, I want to extend a special welcome to you. We have been so busy, so if you'd like a shout out, simply use the comment box. You can use it to just tell me your name and where you're from. If you do use the comment box, make sure you're actually commenting about science and not spinning off talking about something else with somebody else's kids. So it's just for the topic that we're talking about. So I want to extend a special welcome to all of my friends in Australia who got up really early in the morning at like 4 a.m., 3 a.m. yesterday, and from what I understand, periodically for these Facebook Lives. So I want to extend a special welcome to you. Hello. And we actually have a lot to do today. For those of you who are new and who haven't done any classes with us, this is the end of week 4. The first week we did rocketry and lasers and catapults. The second week we did a whole huge astronomy unit, everything from black holes to pulsars to comets to planets to solar astronomy and more. And so that was the second week. The third week was just all about chemistry. And then the fourth week is this week, and we've been doing earth science and we've done life science and biology. Next week, it's going to be earth science. So I've actually already got your shopping list ready for you. I'm going to post it after class today. Here, let me take a look at it real quick. We are going to be doing we're going to be focusing next week just on geology and the Earth's atmosphere. We're going to take a look at also structures. We're going to start to look at civil engineering. How do we use the materials that we find in Earth's crust to make things? We're also going to take a look at sound and resonance and vibrations. We're going to build speakers. And then the following week, I'm actually going to give you the materials like today for 2 weeks out, because the materials for the following week we're going to finally dive into electronics and electricity and magnetism, and you're going to need to order those things if you do want to make things like the motors, and you want to make, what else do we have on here, burglar alarms, tripwires. If you want to make the nerve tester, crystal radios, you're going to need some additional parts. They're very inexpensive. Each part is like $1 or less, 89 cents, but you will be needing a little assortment. You're going to have to put together a little electronics kit for yourself. And so I'm gonna post that on Facebook as soon as we're done with class today. So you'll have that. So next week is geology, earth science, and civil engineering, and some resonance and vibrations. And then the following week is all electricity and electronics and energy. So we have a lot to do. And after that, I think it's renewable energy. Now don't forget, Earth Day is April 22nd. So that's one of the reasons we're doing these types of classes. Okay, so we have a number of people on saying, hello, good morning, Anita. Is this marine biology? No, marine biology is at a different URL. It's superchargedscience.com/class, CLASS, and you can sign up for that. You get an email, and then you click on the link, and then you go to class. So this is not marine biology. We're going to touch a little bit on marine biology. We're going to talk about some critters in the ocean, but this is just more broad. So this is just like an overview of biology. Okay, so we have Sawyer and Sullivan from Maine. Hello. And if you don't have any sound, you probably can't hear me. If you don't have any sound, let's see, hit refresh on your screen. Sometimes Facebook needs a little kick in the pants, so you can do that. Okay. So let's see, we also have, Josh from Canada. Hello. We have Elijah from Idaho. We have a number of folks from Oregon. So welcome. We have Asaya, and pronounce your name for me, I-I-L-Y-A-S, or is it I-L-Y-A-S? From California. So everyone, welcome. I am so excited that people are emailing in too. So we have some folks from Germany, and we have the Pratt family from the Philippines. Hello, welcome. And we have a number of people from Houston, Texas. Hello. We have Nim from Tucson and Gavin from Tillamook. So Tillamook, hello. You guys ready to get started? Is it like the top of the hour yet? Yay. All right. So if you've been around the block with me before, welcome back. We are ready to do a really cool class. When I saw this experiment for the first time a few years back, I thought, this is one that I need to share with like everybody. Like they should not wait till they get to high school in order to do this experiment. So for today's experiment, you're just going to need a couple of jars. It could be glasses of water. You just want to make sure one fits easily on top of the other. You'll need a light source. It could be a lamp, it could be outside, it doesn't matter. You'll need a source of carbon. I'm going to use baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. You can also use baking powder. There's a number of things you can use to get the carbon into the water. And you're going to need some leaves, preferably ones that don't have a ton of veins on them. But I'll walk you through that, and a hole punch or like a pencil or scissors or something like that. And of course you'll need some water. So we are going to be doing a really cool class. You'll also need a way to measure time. So I imagine you've got a clock or a stopwatch available. That will work too. Okay, you guys ready to get started? If you are, say, oh yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Every time I say, are you ready to get started? I say, oh yeah. All of my kids in the other room yell it out so I can hear them too. I have 4 kids at home. I have got a 1st grader, a 4th grader, a 9th, and a 12th. So my house is very busy right now. But everybody's on board and having a great time doing science with everybody else worldwide. In fact, my 18-year-old has now been hired to do a robotics class that he developed, and he's going to be teaching it through another program. So we have a lot going on here. Okay. They're still saying, oh yeah, okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna share my screen with you. We'll talk for about 10 minutes about primary producers and the nitrogen cycle and the oxygen cycle, and then we're gonna do an experiment. Ready? Here we go. Okay, so let me grab my slides. Hang on just a second. Okay, so, well here, we can just start with my face. So when a tree falls over and goes boom, in the forest, what happens to it? Say it out loud. Just pretend like I can hear you. Say it out loud. Come on. Yeah. So what would happen if that tree, it starts to decompose, right? Falls over, goes boom, stuff, right? What would happen instead of falling over and the decomposers move, here, I'll show you the picture. The decomposers moving in and chewing it up and spitting out the new dirt and the nutrients for the forest floor. What if that tree fell right to the center of the earth, right? Nothing would stop it. There was no ground there. When it fell, it wouldn't make any new dirt on the ground, right? But instead, what would happen to that tree? We talked about this in marine biology, those of you who took that class. That's right, it would move to a different area. Eventually, what would happen over time to this forest? If every time a tree fell over, it just disappeared. That's right, the whole forest would die, right? The forest would soak up everything it could, all the nutrients from the forest floor, and eventually it would use it all up. That's what happens in the ocean, kind of. When animals die in the ocean, like you see over here, they sink to the bottom, the animal will sink to the bottom, and they take their minerals and nutrients with them, and then they get decomposed in an area on the sea floor that's nowhere near where it originally died, right? Now, this is one that's near Santa Cruz. It's been decomposing for like 18 months. So the creatures decompose, during that decomposition process, they release minerals, so the cold, deep ocean water actually has higher nutrients than the surface of the ocean. When we talked about that in marine biology. So the way to get those back up to the surface, you need things like earthquakes and currents, underwater volcanoes, things like that that will shove the cold water with that nutrients in it up to the surface. You ever like had a glass of lemonade that you made yourself and you're like so proud and you make it, then you take a sip and you're like, whoa, right? It's either too sour or way too sweet, right? Depending on where the straw is that's taking in the fluid. So basically you have all the nutrients, all the sugar on the ground, and are on the bottom of the glass. And how do you get them to be in the entire solution? You start mixing it up, right? So in the ocean, we mix things up by using volcanoes and earthquakes and that kind of thing. Okay, so every ecosystem needs a source of energy. In the forest, what is the energy source? What gives trees what they need in order to do their thing? Say it out loud. Tell me out loud. You can type it in if you want, but just tell me out loud. Pretend I can hear you and we're totally just talking about science. Right, it's the sun, right? Sunlight. Can you have a forest with no sunlight? No. Okay, so what do we really like that trees make for us? I'll give you a hint. Take a breath. What do we really enjoy? Yeah, oxygen, right? About a quarter of all the air that you breathe in comes from trees. So what does that mean? Trees are what we call primary producers for us on the land. What else makes the oxygen? Through some of the marine biology course already know this one. What makes the rest of the oxygen? Trees don't make 100%. Some of it does come from green plants and seaweed, but most of it, okay, so scientists actually think that this is one of the most important organisms on the planet, and it's called phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are tiny microscopic organisms that live in the ocean, and they also live in fresh water. So it's kind of a catch-all term for lots of different kinds of organisms. Some phytoplankton are bacteria, some like cyanobacteria that you see here, and some are protists, others are single-celled plants. So it's like a big overall term. It's like saying it's a dog. But, you know, it could be a Chihuahua or it could be a Rottweiler, and they look nothing like each other. They're totally different, but we say basically they're all dogs. Okay, so basically the phytoplankton, they all have chlorophyll to transform sunlight into a chemical energy that is, and they do that by a process known as photosynthesis. We're going to talk about that in a second. So basically the phytoplankton will eat the carbon dioxide and they provide us with oxygen. Now, you can't see phytoplankton with your eyes because they are so small, but if you take a teaspoon of the ocean of the water, you'll get about 5 million of this bacteria, phytoplankton. Now, scientists estimate that these little guys make up 50 to 85% of the air we breathe. You can't get an exact number because it's one really hard thing to calculate. You know, in the lab, scientists can figure out by studying just like one of these things and measuring how much oxygen it makes and so forth. But it's hard to know how much is in the ocean because the number of phytoplankton available is going to vary by season and year by year and so forth. Now, one area of phytoplankton is called Cyanobacteria, and those are the real powerhouses in making oxygen. Now, it's also known as blue-green algae, if you've heard of that before, but it's not actually algae, it's bacteria. So that's the name that stuck, but it's not quite accurate because we have the English language. Okay, so scientists used to think that bacteria would just get lucky if they found food. They'd kind of drift in currents and so forth, and if they smacked into the food, yum, right? It was dinner time. But scientists have discovered that the bacteria will actually sniff around the seawater and move towards the food source, like coral. One scientist actually put coral on one side of a chamber and bacteria on the other, and the bacteria were able to find the coral, move to it, and stay there. So the scientist actually, she moved the coral around the tank, and the little bacteria it took them a while, but they would actually eventually find where she kept moving it to. So scientists are still trying to figure out how do they do that in something as big as the ocean, and we don't know, but we do know that it happens because we observe it. Oh, and you see this image at the top of the slide? So that's phytoplankton off the coast of France, as seen from space. This was taken by a NASA space satellite here. You can see all the blue-green algae. Isn't that cool? Okay, so who do you think the primary producers are in the dark parts of the ocean where there is no sun? So scientists found these huge clams, you see them on the left, where the body inside the shell was completely taken over by bacteria. There's no mouth, no guts, no digestive system of the clam anymore. The bacteria actually came in and took it over so it could do photosynthesis in total darkness. Okay, so can you do photosynthesis in darkness? You can't. So we had to have another name for it. So normally in the dark areas, animals are scarce, like the dark parts of the ocean, because they have to eat whatever sinks down from the surface. So scientists originally thought, wow, it's dark down there, there's no light, there's no food, there must be no animals. And then they actually went down there and they found animals not everywhere, but they found them in very specific places. And then they realized, wow, the population density was really big. And they scratched their heads and they thought, well, something else is going on here. And that's where they started to get really curious. So that's how they found out something called chemosynthesis. So it's very similar to photosynthesis, how plants turn sunlight into nutrients. But in chemosynthesis, as you can guess from the name, it uses chemical energy instead of light energy to make food from the carbon in carbon dioxide. So we talk more about this in marine biology. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it now because we go into much more depth of it. But just one of the things I wanted you to notice is that once we found this out, we started looking on the surface of the planet, and we found chemosynthesis like in places we didn't even expect. Like we found it happening in marshes and boggy places, things that don't have a lot of sunlight. We were able to find it was just here all the time. We just didn't know where to look. Now, speaking of not knowing where to look, what do you think about these odd-looking organisms on our planet? If you think you have to go to outer space to find unusual life forms, you just have to look around our own planet. So the bat flower is actually part of the yam family, like sweet potato yam, and it's 12 inches across, not counting the 2-foot-long whiskers, and you'll find them in Asia, Southeast Asia. Now, the swaddled baby's flower is actually a type of orchid. You'll find them in the Colombian Andes. And the happy alien flower, these are tiny, stick your finger up, like 0.1 finger up. This flower is no bigger than your finger. And they're also known as slipperworts, and they are also found in South America. Okay, so what do you do though if your space is really your thing? These flowers are cool, but you really want to go to outer space. Well, you're in luck because there is a new field in science called astrobiology. So if you've ever had a fish to feed and you fed it too much food, or you feed the fish too much, or you change the water too quickly, you know that fish is going to die. And it seems like you have to be really careful with life, right? And because you look at, if you've ever tried to change a goldfish bowl or something like that, it seems like life is really fragile. And in some ways it is. But it also turns out we're finding life everywhere. I mean, we've found them at the highest and the lowest pH levels, and the coldest and the hottest places on Earth, at high altitudes, deep underground, high pressures, low pressures, you name it, we're finding it. So now scientists are rethinking, maybe life isn't quite as delicate and fragile as we think it is, like all the time, everywhere. It is to a certain extent, but also we're finding it in very unusual places where we didn't expect life to ever be able to exist or thrive. Now, Europa, the moon that I'm showing you here, Europa is one of the places that scientists think there might be life. And by life, we don't mean like people walking around. We think tiny little single-cell microorganisms and bacteria type of life. So scientists are thinking, hey, there are volcanoes that are spraying jets of hot water into space. And so what they want to do is they want to fly a spacecraft through one of these jets so they can taste it and take samples and figure out what's going on inside. Now, it could be an underwater volcano, it could be a hydrothermal vent like I'm showing you here. This was actually a video taken of one of the underwater volcanoes on the ocean floor of planet Earth. And they're kind of like ocean's underwater hot springs. They're so hot that the scientists actually will call them the ocean's blowtorches. If you take your submarine too close, you'll actually melt the windows off because the energy coming out of here is so huge. So far, scientists are thinking that you don't just need sunlight. Okay, so originally when I was in school, I would open up my biology book and it said, in order for life to exist, you need, these 3 things. And 2 of them were sunlight and water, okay? And so for a long time, that's what we all thought. And now, because of where we're finding life, like at the bottom of the ocean floor, in toxic environments where it's like even worse than, it's like a tub of Drano. It's even worse than that. Now we're changing our definition. So now what scientists are saying is that in order for life to exist, you need 2 things. You need an energy source. And so that's what astrobiologists are looking for in space. That's why Enceladus and Europa, the moons of the big planets, have caught their attention because water is shooting out of them, which was so hot that was suggesting that, hey, if that water is hotter than it should be, chances are there is an energy source on that moon. And if it's liquid water, that's the second thing that scientists are thinking, called a solvent. So life as being redefined, which it's currently in debate, but they're thinking it needs life in order to thrive. It needs a solvent and it needs an energy source. And that's if you look for those 2 things, chances are you'll find life there. We don't know how life got there, but we know that that's where you might be able to find it. So if you put salt in water. So let's talk about what a solvent is, because that may not make sense. Okay, so a solvent is a chemical that breaks molecules apart. So when you put like salt in water, for example, the salt will break into its 2 parts, sodium and chloride. Salt is sodium chloride. So when you put it in water, it turns into sodium and chloride bits. And the solvent is the water, it's the liquid. When you use like fingernail polish, like acetone, to remove your fingernail, when you use fingernail polish remover to remove your fingernail polish, so the acetone, the remover, is tearing apart the fingernail polish into smaller bits. So the acetone is the solvent, right? A cleaner. Anything that causes molecules to dissolve and break apart is called a solvent. Make sense? Okay, so you need a solvent for chemical reactions to take place. Like, have you ever put baking soda and vinegar together? What happens? You tell me what happens. you get a lot of bubbles, right? So what flavor bubbles? Carbon dioxide, right? Okay, good. What happened though? Like, would it work if you used baking soda and vinegar and both were in solid form? The answer is no. You've actually seen this before. It's an Alka-Seltzer tablet. So there's these little white tablets that you can buy from the store. Grown-ups use them if they've got headaches or they don't feel good. But they don't just eat the tablet. What do? They stick it in a glass of water. And what does the water do? The water allows the solid form of vinegar and the solid form of baking soda to start to move around so they can chemically react. And so the water is the solvent. Does that make sense? So it allows those two reactions to move around and do your thing, to chemically react, right? Okay, so if you're an astrobiologist, you're going to start looking for worlds that have an energy source and a solvent, and that's going to be your job. That's what you do. So so we talked about this in the marine biology class. So let's move over to photosynthesis. Okay, so that's chemosynthesis. If you want to learn more, there's a free marine biology class. You can go sign up for it. It's www.superchargedscience.com/class, CLASS. So superchargedscience.com/class. And we go into more depth and we talk about hydrothermal vents and why and what we found and what scientists are now trying to figure out. And that even brought more puzzles. So you can open worms everywhere, right? Which is fascinating when you're a scientist. Remember, science isn't about what you know. It's about how you handle all this new stuff that you find out. Okay, so most organisms need something to breathe, right? Most living organisms that we have experience with. Okay, forget the energy and solvent thing for a minute. We're going to flip back into photosynthesis. Ready? Okay, take a breath in. Now let it out. Oxygen, right? We need oxygen to breathe. So most of them need oxygen. The ones that don't need oxygen, those are archaea, they're viruses, bacteria. Also these tiny little 1 millimeter long multi-cell new species that scientists recently found on the ocean floor. They haven't named them yet because they haven't even figured out how they work. But those don't seem to need oxygen either. We don't know why. We don't know what they are. New puzzle for scientists. Okay, so the main part of the oxygen cycle here on Earth is called photosynthesis. And that's how the plants, that's what happens when you convert sunlight into energy for the plant and oxygen for our atmosphere. So things like plants, green algae, and a number of microorganisms like the ones we talked about before, they'll take light, they'll take 6 molecules of water, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, to make 1 sugar molecule and 6 oxygen molecules. Does this look like a little bit of scary chemistry? You betcha, but this is just what I talked about. So 6 waters, 6 carbon dioxides, add some light, put it in a bowl, stir it together, throw it through the photosynthesis machine, and now we have sugar and 6 oxygens. Isn't that cool? You just read a chemical formula. Okay, so the main part of the oxygen cycle here, as I mentioned, is photosynthesis. And for plants, carbon dioxide enters in through the breathing pores on the surface of the plant's leaves, the stomata, and the water and the nutrients enter in through the roots, right? So it's like a whole system. The oxygen gas leaves the leaf through those pores, and the sugar, the glucose, is distributed to the rest of the plant so the plant can make its own food. So it's the fuel that it needs, the fuel that the plant needs. So people rely on plants to convert the sun's energy into food that we can use. Things like, if you've ever had lettuce or apples, right? So those have complex molecules, starches, proteins, and stuff that our body will break down into simpler molecules like glucose that we'll use for energy. So everything is used, everything is related. Take a deep breath in. Now let it out. What was in that breath? Air, right? Good. I showed you the slide too early. I'm sorry. So air, right? What is air made up of? Gas. Okay, good. What flavor? Gas. Oxygen. Good. What else though? Is it mostly oxygen or is it mostly something else? Yeah, it's not oxygen. So if your breath is this big, this much is oxygen. What's this? It's actually nitrogen. Most of the stuff that we inhale with a breath, but our body doesn't necessarily use, is nitrogen. Nitrogen is important to living things. You're going to find it in the nucleus of cells. You need it to build amino acids to form proteins, which are found all over the body. The problem is nitrogen makes up 78% of the Earth's atmosphere, but plants and animals, we can't use it directly. We can't take nitrogen, they can't take nitrogen and turn it directly into the stuff that they need. So right now, there's only 2 ways on our planet to do this. Either with a certain type of bacteria, though it's like free floating in the dirt, and the other lives on the tips of roots. Or you can do it with lightning. There's another kind we can talk about later that lives in the ocean. So the end result is that the nitrogen winds up in a molecule in the dirt that plants can access and use. And there's another way, like during the decomposition phase, where bacteria comes in and decomposes dead organisms, that also puts nitrogen back in the soil. But that's not too popular with plants because the nitrates actually are toxic to plants. So you can see how this is like a really big thing. Okay, so that's the nitrogen cycle, and you can learn more about that as you get more into high school. But I want to focus just on photosynthesis because that's something that, you read about in a book, and then, it's usually just glossed over, but it's so important. So photosynthesis, people just look around, they're like, oh, it's green, it must be able to do photosynthesis. So there's this really cool experiment you can do by punching holes with a leaf punch, with a leaf and a hole punch. And we are going to measure the rate of photosynthesis, like what the rate the plant is converting all of that, with that chemical reaction I had here. You can actually measure this rate doing a really simple experiment. You ready for this? If you are, say, oh yeah. Okay, so here's what you want to do. So the first thing we want to do here, actually, if I just show you my slide, doing this in front of you is going to be pretty small, but I have a slide prepared. So we talked about how photosynthesis is how plants use energy to convert the carbon dioxide into usable carbon for us. Okay, so what you want to do is get a hole punch, and then you're going to punch out holes in your leaf. Now, you can use scissors if you don't have a hole punch, but the important thing is you want to cut the areas between the veins. You can punch like about 20 of these things out, and then what you want to do is you're going to put the leaf in a cup of water. Now, if you have distilled water, that's great. If you don't, that's okay. You could just use regular tap water, and we're going to put baking soda in either kind. The baking soda, that's going to be our carbon dioxide source here, because we're going to need water and carbon dioxide and light. So we're going to mix these three things together with the leaf. So we have the water. Let's see, how am I going to do this? Which one fits better on top? Okay, so I'm going to put, so the one that goes on the bottom is the one that we're going to put in here. So the first, one of the things we have to do though is get the air out that's in the plant. Let me show you how to do this. Where'd that slide go? Okay, so we're going to put a light source on top. So to start, you're going to find that the little leaf circles that you cut out, if you put them in the water, here, I'll do this for you, they'll start to float on the surface, and they won't actually go into the water. Here, I have one in here. And it's like, it just sits on the surface of the water. You can't see my face. It just kind of sits on the surface and it doesn't go down. That's because it's got air right now inside. So it's got these pockets of air. So we have to get rid of those. And in order to do that, what you do, you're going to, here, I actually put it on a slide. If I just stick to the slide, this will work, right? Okay. So we need those little leaf circles to sink. That way we can time how long it will take for them to make enough oxygen so they will start to float. So we'll do this by putting the leaf circles in a syringe. Make sure the syringe doesn't have a needle. And you're going to put them in a syringe like this, okay? And we're basically going to push out all the air. You're going to cover the end with your thumb. And you're going to pull a vacuum and kind of force the water into the leaf. Now, you know you've done this right when all of a sudden you do this and all the leaves will fall to the bottom of the syringe. Yeah, you see the leaf going up? Okay, so hang on. We're not quite to that step yet. So you've got your leaf. So cut out your leaf little bits from your leaf chads, they call them. And so go ahead and hole punch your leaf and get a couple of circles out. Okay, so go ahead and do that. And then go ahead and put them into your your needle here, or your needleless syringe, okay? And then you're going to fill it full of water. Whoop, I missed one. Okay, so I'm going to put all of my little leaf circles into the syringe. And then I'm going to fill the syringe with water. Whoops, and one of them came out. Hang on. Okay, I'm going to fill it with water. And then you're going to, you see how there's an air bubble on top? So you're going to go ahead and squeeze it until it starts to have water that flows out of it. And then put your finger on top and go kind of back and forth and back and forth. And what we're doing is we are forcing water into those air pockets. And if your finger comes off, that's okay. Just push it back up until it's solid water in here. and then put your thumb over it. Okay, and back and forth. Okay, and then you'll hit a point where all of a sudden all the little leaf chads will just fall straight to the bottom. Okay, and once that, it might take like 15, 20 times, but once that happens, now the leaf doesn't have any more air pockets, so it'll fall to the bottom of your container. So now when I put them in, there they go. Now they're at the very bottom. Okay, so I've got my little leaf bits here in the very, very bottom. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. There's a couple of them down here. Okay, so now what you do is you're going to add like a spoonful of baking soda into your the water that has the leaves, the leaf circles, and stir it around. So that's your carbon dioxide, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to set a heat sink on top. This is going to be called a heat sink because if we just put this in sunlight, now we're going to be heating up the water in addition to having light. And we need to take the heat out of this experiment for it to work right. So we're going to use another cup of water because water has what we call a high heat capacity, means that it takes a long time for it'll absorb a lot of energy before it raises temperature. So we're going to use this one. So this one will get warm, this one will stay cool, but the light energy will pass through, and that's all we want for the leaf to interact with the leaf. So we want the light energy to pass, but not the heat energy, the infrared. So so then basically all you're doing is you're putting a cup of a cup of just plain water on top, and then you're going to put this out in the sun, or you can use a lamp if you have a strong lamp inside, and then you're just going to wait. And this is what you're going to see. Okay. So it's going to, here, let me start it over. There we go. All right, you see that? Now you can start timing it as soon as you put it in the sunlight, and as soon as like the light is starting to provide energy to the leaf. So what's going on now is the leaf is splitting the water to the leaf is starting that chemical reaction. See that they're going up, up, up. Those little bubbles, what are those bubbles? Are they carbon dioxide or are they oxygen? They're oxygen, because the leaf is making little bubbles of oxygen that are coming out of those little pores that are on the leaf, and they are floating. Now sometimes this might take a couple of minutes to get started. Yeah, wouldn't this be a cool science fair project? You could change different things. You could change the color of light. You could try it just with red light, just with yellow light, just with green light, just with blue light, just with UV light, right? And see which wavelength really makes the most oxygen. You could also change the distance the light is from the cup. You could change the kind of leaf you use. Doesn't have to be spinach. Yeah, isn't that cool? So you tell me now, what's going on here? You know enough based on what we've already talked about. So what's going on? I'll be quiet for about 20 seconds. And yes, it is possible, but tell me what's going on here. I'll restart the little video. You tell me out loud what's happening. Start at the top with photosynthesis. Go. Okay, good. Did you happen to mention anything like this? Did you say the water is combining with the carbon dioxide, with the light to make oxygen? That's exactly what you're seeing. You're seeing this chemical reaction in action. Isn't that cool? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, what if you use different forms of carbon dioxide? You know, what if you use soda water? That has a ton of carbon dioxide. In fact, that might work too well because the carbon dioxide is already dissolved in the water, but you could totally try that. I actually hadn't thought of trying that till like right now. What else could you try? Could you try baking soda? Anything else that has like a carbonate in it should work. If you have, you know, I'm wondering if the washing soda will work because that's also a carbonate. You can find it in the laundry aisle. So there's a lot of different possibilities. All right, so what do you guys think? Let me see, let me check to see if we have questions that have been coming in. Let's see. Oh, thank you so much. let's see, you can pause and rewind. Okay, just noticed, oh well, the girls are still watching, no problem. Oh, by the way, if you've just joined us, my name is Aurora with Supercharged Science. This video will be archived into our video archive. So if you go on the left and when you know where it says like posts, images, or photos and videos, click on videos and you will see this video available. You can watch it anytime. So if you just joined us and you missed the first part, don't worry, just go back and rewatch it. We're actually just a few minutes from the end, so you'll be able to do that right away. Okay, all right, so go ahead and tell me in your comments, what did you like best about this class so we can know to do more of that. We've been together for about a half an hour. So what did you learn? What was an ooh wow? What are some ideas you have for experiments now that class is just about over and you are ready to do your experiments on your own? So what do you think? Go ahead and type it in the comments box right now. Okay, and no, there was no worksheet for this one, Liam. This was just only the really big classes that you register for have worksheets. We're just, if you notice the, what am I trying to say? If you notice, for example, things like this have words that are underlined. This is taken from, these are a few slides taken from a much larger presentation that does have a worksheet with it, but that's not what we're doing today. I'm just sharing with you one part of it. Okay, let's see, other questions that have come on. Can you do this with any kind of leaf? The answer is yes. I would encourage you to go out in your garden, grab different leaves, things like pine needles, probably not such a good choice, but something that doesn't have a lot of veins where you can actually get a really good sample from is gonna work really well. Other things, so a couple of kids are excited because they now have an excuse not to eat their spinach at dinner. Okay, I didn't say that one out loud. So let's see. You like doing the experiments. You like the flying leaves. Cool experiments. Okay. So if you have done science before and you've gotten dry, boring textbooks and you've rolled your eyes and you have no idea how to make sense of this stuff, so this is what we're doing. So we are taking it and making it real, making it exciting. You can read about photosynthesis in any science book, but actually doing it, now you're excited, right? So here's what I want from you. I will give you a prize if you can do this experiment and take a little mini video and post it in the comment section of this experiment. Let me know that you've done it, and I actually have a download that I want to give you. It's a really cool osmosis experiment you can use with root vegetables, and I'm going to give that one to you. Normally you'd have to pay for it because it's part of like this bigger program, but I'll just give that one to you. So if you want that prize, just send me an email, aurora@superchargedscience.com. Let me know, hey, I was in the photosynthesis class, I posted my video, check it out here. And so that would really help me out. There's been a number of kids who've been sending me their photos, which are fantastic, and I don't have time to post them all. So if you can help me just post your video, post of you doing science, that would help me out. And also it would show other kids maybe ideas if the experiment doesn't work, you know, things that they could try. For example, there was one I have to share with you that was amazing. This kid put, he was doing the DNA experiment. Here, let me put it over here so you can see it. We had a number of people that tried the DNA experiment, but you know, it either didn't work or they couldn't figure it out or something, I don't know. And but then this kid showed this to me. I thought, oh, this is amazing. Let's show this to everybody. So he not only figured out how to do the experiment, he lined them all up, tried a whole bunch of different vegetables. I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow. And then he also showed, oh, here, they're all coming out over here. He also shone a light underneath to illuminate the DNA strands that he found, which was a fantastic idea. So you can actually see more of them here. You can actually see this little ghostly white wispy stuff was from the DNA extraction. And so he actually didn't let not having a funnel stop him. He made his own from the top of a water bottle. Okay, so feel free to post things like that with the experiment, with you doing it. I will give you a prize if you do that, so thank you so much. If you would like to join me for that DNA experiment, extraction experiment, we're doing it tomorrow on Facebook Live at 10 a.m. If you've already done it, stick with me anyway, because we also have a release for what we're doing next week. Actually, I'll just tell you what we're doing next week. We are going to be putting together a shopping list. Actually, I'm looking at it right now. Next week, we're going to start with geology. So if you have a handful of of rocks, get them, because I'm going to tell you how to test them and how to tell one from the other. I'll give you like 6 or 7 different tests that field geologists use. So we're going to do a geology field trip. We're also going to learn how to use the materials that the Earth's crust already has. So we're going to do some civil engineering classes. We're going to do bridges, skyscrapers, you name it. We're also going to take a look at how to make your own speakers. So, you know, like speakers that you can hear out of. Just using really simple materials. If you want to start, no, speakers is kind of the transition from from next week. So the following week is all electronics. You will need to put together an electronics kit if you want to build the projects. If not, you can just watch and that's totally fine. But I put together, and I'm going to give it to you like right now, like in 20 minutes, the materials you'll need along with the order links. And I found them at the the most inexpensive places online. Like the parts are like 25 cents or 50 cents or $1. You will, and I've highlighted exactly how many you need for the next 2 weeks of classes. So we're going to be reusing a lot of these materials, and actually we're going to use them beyond as well. So that'll be available to you. So we're going to do electricity, electronics, tripwires, burglar alarms. We're going to do all kinds of, we're going to make a crystal radio, so it's a battery-free radio. And so we're going to make a lot of things, but a lot of people won't have these parts, but I'm going to give it to you in advance so you have plenty of time to get your pieces. Okay, so I'm going to be posting that. If you know anybody who's crazy wild about electronics, please do pass this information along to them so they can get that. I hope this has been helpful. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. We're going to do a DNA extraction. The materials for that are already posted on Facebook. And if you have any questions, you can always email me, Aurora at superchargedscience.com. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon experimenting. Now you know what you can experiment with, and feel free to use all the spinach you need to make this experiment go. Tell your mom you're doing it in the name of science. I wonder if leaves from broccoli would work. I don't know. What do you think? Or those great big collard leaves? Yeah. So give that a try. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next class. Take care, everyone.